book lovers, welcome back to the Bibliovert channel. My name is Jacqueline, and for today's video we are going to be doing a part 2 of talking about fanfic, specifically Draco and Hermione, or dramione fanfic. Last August, I was really nervous to post the part 1. I was reading a lot of fanfic and really enjoying it, but I hadn't really been sharing it in a public way. So I was very nervous to do it, and I was so pleasantly surprised at how many people wanted recommendations, gave me fantastic recommendations, so I felt encouraged to do a part 2. Before we get started, real fast, if you are curious of where to read fanfic, how to download it, if you want to read it on your Kindle, I talk about all of those things in part 1 and do a step-by-step process on how to find your fanfic on AO3, download it, and then send it to your Kindle. So if you are wanting to know a little bit more about that, definitely go check out that video. It's at the very beginning. But let's go ahead and jump on into the video. I have about 10 fanfics on my list. Originally I was going to do more, but I think I'm going to save some of those for another video. But I decided to break these 10 fics down into 3 different categories. There's going to be a little bit of crossover, but for the most part this kind of made sense in my head, and the categories are your sweet, fluffy, tender, warm fuzzies kind of fanfic. The second one is kind of your more angsty, toxic, working through a lot of emotions, primarily anger kind of fanfics. And then the third one I made because I had 2 fics in particular that I absolutely loved, but they didn't really fit into one of those 2 categories. So I decided to make a third one, and it is good storytelling. So because 2 of my favorite fanfics from this year fall into the good storytelling category, we're gonna start with that one first. The first fic on this list is actually my favorite book of the entire year. I loved it so incredibly much. Absolutely fantastic. It is now tied for my favorite fanfic of all time with Manacled by Sin-Lin Yu and Measure of a Man by Inadays22, and it is The Disappearances of Draco Malfoy by Speechwriter. This fanfic is canon compliant, and it kind of takes the place of book 7, which, if I'm going to be completely honest, I preferred this fanfic to book 7 because it's absolutely extraordinary. The premise of this fic is that while Draco is on the astronomy tower at the end of book 6 attempting to kill Dumbledore, he instead takes Dumbledore's offer for the Order of the Phoenix to hide both him and his parents. What then ensues is that Draco goes on the Horcrux hunt with Harry, Hermione, and Ron. One of my absolute favorite things about this fanfic is that it, in my opinion, paired plot with character development so well. So incredibly well. It was really fast-paced, a lot of things happened, but these characters changed and grew and just had the most beautiful arc. It's a dual POV with both Hermione and Draco's points of views, but then you do kind of get a sprinkling of other people here and there, but the 2 primary ones are Draco and Hermione. Draco's arc is so complex because at the beginning of the fic, he is still prejudiced, he is still really hateful, he still believes all of these things that he has been told from his childhood, and throughout this fic, as he is in proximity with Hermione and also the Muggle world, he is having to come to terms with his prior beliefs and prejudices and work through it. But what I love about it so much is that so much of it was internal. There's not really that angst that we can see in a lot of other fanfics, and instead it's just this really beautiful, seamless arc that he has. He's very introspective, he challenges himself a lot, and it was just absolutely stunning watching his character development. Another part of this fic that pleasantly surprised me that I was not expecting, I don't hate Ron. I don't think he would be a good match with Hermione, so I don't pair them together, but I think he's an interesting character. So when a fic has particular Ron bashing, I'm not for it, but I'm also not wanting him to end up with Hermione, obviously. But Ron in this book, honestly, might be my favorite thing about this book. I was sobbing at like 3 o'clock in the morning reading this fic. It is beautiful, it's gut-wrenching, it hurts. I absolutely loved his story, and it was hard, but it was so good, which again, you don't see that very often in Dramione fanfics. There's a lot of Ron bashing, all of those kinds of things, but it was just really good. So needless to say, highly recommend this book. If you end up reading it, please let me know. I want to know all of your thoughts, and I really hope you enjoy it as much as I did. The next and last one in the good storytelling category is Clean by Olivia Blake. You might recognize her for her published works like The Atlas Six and Alone with You in the Ether, but she's also written fanfic, and I've been reading a handful of them and really enjoyed them, but particularly this one, Clean. I do, however, feel like I need to give like a little heads up, asterisk, caveat, warning, whatever you would like. I did nearly DNF this book at the beginning. There's a little bit of cheating and manipulation that happens. It's actually Hermione doing it to another character, and I did not particularly enjoy it. However, this fic ended up redeeming itself 100 times over. It was so incredibly good. And when we interviewed Olivia Blake for the Bibliovertpodcast last year, when I told her I would be reading Clean, she also kind of gave me a heads up and warning, saying that there were some things that the fic did not age well, I believe is the way that she put it, specifically talking about some of the things that happened at the beginning of the fic. So just a little heads up about it. However, it ended up being really good. So the concept for this fic is, what if Hermione and Draco were paired together on a project during 6th year? They got to know each other more, they ended up falling in love, and it was actually Hermione who found Draco in the bathroom during 6th year instead of Harry, where Harry accidentally almost kills Draco. This fic absolutely sucked me in. It was so fascinating. It was so good. It was so compelling. Again, the beginning, there were a few things that I didn't necessarily love, but I ended up being completely sucked into it. I loved Draco. I really liked Hermione's characters. The side characters made this fic a lot of fun. There was, again, one thing that kind of happened at the end that I was like, but we're just gonna ignore it. We're just gonna ignore it. Pretend like it didn't happen. But it was really fun, really enjoyable, and I would actually highly recommend it. So the next category that we are going to be talking about is kind of the toxic, angsty Draco and Hermione category. This one is not comprised of my personal favorites. However, I did really enjoy a lot of the books that are on this list. There's one that I just finished a couple of days ago, and I'm still a little unsettled by it, but we'll get there. The first one is a wild ride from beginning to end, and it is Love in the Time of the Zombie Apocalypse by Rizzle. As I'm sure you can surmise, there is a zombie apocalypse. The Order of the Phoenix did beat Voldemort. However, in the following months after that, a zombie apocalypse outbreak happens, and Hermione is trying to figure out how to find a cure. She has to enlist the help of Draco, who has been put in Azkaban because of the science and research that he conducted for Voldemort, as he was a Death Eater. And basically we find out that Draco was on the team that helped create the zombie apocalypse. So they're trying to figure it out. Again, wild ride. There is so much plot. It was just one thing to another. So if you are a plot-driven person, then this is a great fic for you. There is character development, but it comes secondary to the plot. So much happens. Draco is silent, broody, violent. He kills someone with a folding chair. I'm here for it. So there's that. I will say, I was completely lost at the epilogue of the book, which ended up being like 30 chapters. It's technically after everything with the zombie apocalypse is over. It is then their life afterwards. I did not enjoy that part at all. I almost wish that it was a separate fic, not like a novella, but just like a separate epilogue, because if it had ended just at the end of the whole zombie situation, 5 out of 5 stars. Loved it so much. Was here for it. Such an exciting ride. The epilogue, though, completely lost me and felt like a completely different story. I didn't like it. So in my mind, that's where it ends. The last couple 100 pages don't exist to me. And I think that that's a fairly common thought process with that. When I was reading through reviews, a lot of people were saying something similar. So just a little heads up about that. I didn't love the epilogue, but the rest of the fic, was just so entertaining and so wild. Every page was crazy. The next one is arguably one of the more angsty, toxic Dramione fanfics out there, and it is Breathmin's Battle Scars by Onyx and Elm. Y'all, when I was going back and reading my notes, it was literally like, this is so toxic, but I'm not gonna lie, I kind of liked it. It was so much, but again, like, it was just so raw, and they're very clearly dealing with so much hurt and pain and anger and frustration, and wow. It is a little bit, they're a little bit too violent towards each other for me personally, for my taste, so I would recommend reading the trigger warnings and going into that with your eyes open in that sense. It was a bit too much for my personal preferences, but like I read the whole thing and I'm pretty sure I gave it like 3 or 4 stars, so. But if you were looking for that more like gritty, raw, angry fic, then this one fits the bill for you 100%. The next one is actually one that I just finished recently, and I enjoyed it, but I thought I was going to enjoy it a lot more than I really did, and it is The Fallout by Every Thursday. This is another really, really popular one. It's really, really long, and it's really, really fascinating. It's kind of made up of these like vignettes and moments. It's not a diary, but it does keep up with like what day and time it is, which is really interesting. So you might get day 150 of the war and then what time it is, and it could just be one sentence. It could be several pages long. The next one might be 5 minutes later, or it could be 3 months down the road. So it's just really interesting, like you're getting these little windows of time that you're getting to see these interactions. Basically the concept is, what if the war took several years longer than it did canonically, and Harry and Ron go off together to do Horcrux, and Hermione instead is working for the Order, and she is in these battles and skirmishes that happen with Death Eaters, and she's battling with this feeling of not being brave enough, of not being good enough, being left behind by her friends, and then also these really traumatic experiences that happen, and she's trying to work through them. Draco has decided to leave the Death Eaters and work for the Order, and he's not particularly welcome there for a very, very long time, and he's still working through all of his anger and his hurt and his frustrations, and they just kind of fall into each other. So we see these, little vignettes and these little moments that happen. I will say this book is over 1,000 pages long, but because it was like these little snippets, I feel like I had a little bit of a difficult time feeling connected to the characters. And there were some things, and I'll mention this for a couple of other fics later on today, but I didn't really think Hermione felt very Hermione-like in this one. However, I would literally chop off my left arm to get a Draco POV of the Fallout, because I just think it would be fascinating. Again, there's a lot of the anger, a lot of the hurt, a lot of the working through their trauma together, a lot of the toxic and angsty vibes. But by the end of it, I just felt like I couldn't quite connect with them the way that I was hoping to, but I'm still really glad that I read it. Okay, so this fic is one that I'm a little bit unsettled about. So I don't necessarily want this to be like, oh, this was a 5-star book, it's a recommendation. It's not like that. It's more, I need someone to talk to about this fic, but I also do think that there are people out there who would really like this premise. So I'm going to lay out the premise for you, but personally, I did not necessarily enjoy this one, so just like have that caveat, but I do think it fits into this category fairly well. It is Mon Couteau Aiguisé by Jillian Eliza. This fanfic is essentially, it starts in year 3 and goes all the way through year 7, and Hermione becomes friends with Draco and the Slytherins when Harry and Ron are not being good friends for her, and she ends up taking the Dark Mark and being a Death Eater by, I think, year 5 or year 6. So basically this fic, it's very dark and it's like villain Hermione. The Malfoys are really good, the Weasleys are bad, Harry and Ron are awful friends, which canonically they weren't the best friends, but who was when you're that age? And there's just a lot of darkness, and she like enthusiastically serves Voldemort and becomes his second in command. Now, I will say, it does resolve itself by the end of the book. There are some changes and things like that, but it was very much like Hermione's villain origin story, which just wasn't necessarily for me personally. There were a few other things that I didn't like about it as well, mainly like the more explicit nature to it for how young they were, that like there was just aspects of that just I didn't particularly feel comfortable with. However, if you are looking for a dark Hermione fanfic, then this is one that fits into that, but please be aware that some of the content, it's just not one that I would necessarily like wholeheartedly recommend to someone. But I had never read a dark Hermione kind of AU situation before, so I thought I would add it to the list, but take it with a grain of salt. Okay, so the next category is the like cute, tender, fluffy, sweet, romantic category. The first one is 10 out of 10 by Morgan Mercy. This is a fic where the Order of the Phoenix wins. However, there is still marriage law, and Draco and Hermione are paired together, and I believe they have 16 days, little over 2 weeks, something like that, before they have to get married, and they are trying to get to know each other, and basically they have a scale of 1 to 10 of how comfortable are we around each other, and like they want to get to 10 out of 10 before day 16 or something like that. So you follow them one for each day. It's cute, it's tender, it's funny. There's a little bit of spice in it, and I was pleasantly surprised at how much fun I had. I will say there are a lot of like signs around Hermione's home that are like live, laugh, love that like I would kind of chuckle at, and like there's a reason that it's in there, but just be warned that there's kind of like those kitschy little moments that happen throughout the fic. But other than that, I thought it was really cute. Okay, so the next one is Apple Pies and Other Amends by To Eat a Peach. This is a fic that starts a year after the Battle of Hogwarts and covers about a year. So Hermione has decided that she's ready to start healing and working through the trauma that she went through and talking about it. She's dating Ron, and he's not ready to start talking about those things yet, so they do end up breaking up, but she takes on baking as kind of a healing response, and then she'll take those baked goods to other people who experienced trauma in the war, and they just kind of have like a healing time together. So she starts off with people in the Order of the Phoenix like Kingsley Shacklebolt and Luna, and they're just able to talk and heal together while they eat good food. And then eventually Hermione moves on to people who were not in the Order, people like Gregory Goyle and Pansy and Theo Knott. And the very last person that she has on her, I believe she calls it trauma tour, is Draco Malfoy. Now, we get to see his point of view, that he has been waiting for her to show up because he has been hearing about her from all of his friends about how good of a baker she is and how she was brave to come to them and talk to them about the things that they went through and that she went through and extend forgiveness and healing between the two of them. So he has been waiting for her to show up. She finally does, and he asks her to teach him how to bake. So every Saturday they get together, they bake, and they start a really cute relationship from there on out. And it's cute, it's fluffy, it's sickeningly sweet in the most fun kinds of ways. It made me so hungry because all it does is talk about baked goods. But it was really adorable. It was a fun read, and it was a quick read as well, so I would recommend it. The next one is Love and Other Historical Accidents by Pacific Rimbaud. This fic is about Draco and Hermione. They work together in the Department of Ministries. They've been working together, I think, for 5 years. It might be 10, but I'm pretty sure it's 5. And the work that they've been doing together is on time turners. So one day, everything goes wrong, and they are taken back to, like, I believe the early 1800s. I'm not doing a good job selling this fic right now, but back to the 1800s, and basically it is a comedy of errors that happen. It is so funny watching them try and figure out how to live in the 1800s. They pretend that they're brother and sister. They're trying to fix the time turner. So many things go wrong, and it is so funny. I do have 2 caveats. The first one, which Pacific Rimbaud was kind enough to mention this at the very beginning of the fic, so it did give me a good heads up. I do not enjoy miscommunication, especially when it's excessive. It will drive me up a wall. But Pacific Rumball does mention at the very beginning of the fic that this is going to have excessive miscommunication. So because of that, I felt warned. However, it got to a point that I was like, oh my gosh, please just communicate and we'll be fine. So go into that maybe with that understanding. The second one is Hermione didn't feel very Hermione-like to me in this one. It was really interesting. Obviously, they're back in time. You would think that she would be reading her way through every library possible to figure out how to get back to present day. Instead, it's Draco who's doing all of that work. He's the one who's working in the lab. He's the one who's trying to figure things out, and Hermione just kind of lets him, which I just felt wasn't very authentic to her character. So maybe have that in mind as well, but it's really cute. It's really funny. I had a really good time. I laughed a lot and enjoyed the fic. But those two things I do think kind of made it not the perfect reading experience for me personally. And the last one, I genuinely adored this fanfic. And honestly, I think I enjoyed it primarily for the side characters. They're so stinking good and it was so freaking cute. It is Remember Us as War by Anya Paradox. This is a Order of the Phoenix wins, beats Voldemort, but there is another marriage law that happens, and Hermione goes to Kingsley Shacklebolt and forcefully threatens him that if Harry and Ginny do not end up together, that she will like systematically take down everything. She is just determined for Harry to get to be happy and have a little bit of happiness and family in his life. So because of her making that request, it sets this whole thing in motion where she ends up being paired with Draco. The Ministry of Magic basically says, oh, the whole reason that y'all are paired up together is because y'all are the most magically paired, all this kind of thing. And she's like, I don't think that's true. So she essentially figures out what the reasons were that they were paired together, the things that the ministry was looking for, and then also instead makes a more logical, appropriate, scientific one of like, if you were actually going to pair people up, do it this way. So of course she's badass, she's amazing, she's so smart, and it was really fun reading that. But her and Draco go on that little journey together. But y'all, the side characters were so tender. So stinking tender. Specifically, Theo and Luna are a couple, and I ate up every single chapter they had together. I thought it was the cutest freaking thing in the whole freaking world. I loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. The ending, there was a twist that I did not see coming. All of a sudden we had action and I wasn't ready for it. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've actually been thinking about going back and rereading it recently because I just thought it was really, really sweet and just fun and a good time. And again, those characters were amazing. And that is it for the tender, fluffy, cute category, and it for all of the recommendations that I have for today's video. If you have read any that you absolutely love, please give me your recommendations in the comments down below. I am always, 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 always looking for more recommendations. I'm in desperate need for some more Dramione fanfic in my life. But that is it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to learn a little bit more about us, you can check us out on Instagram at the Bibliovertpodcast. We also have a podcast called the Bibliovertpodcast. We have episodes that come out on Mondays on Apple, Spotify, and Google Play. We primarily do YA and NA fantasy as well as romance and some sci-fi, and we just have a good time. It's so much fun. And lastly, we have a Patreon that is truly made up of the most incredible book reading, loving people in the entire world. We have a chat. It is so much fun. We do a book buddy read every month and a Zoom date to talk about that book. We also have behind the scenes content and Patreon exclusive episodes, and it's just the sweetest thing in the whole wide world, and I love it so much. So we always have room in our family for one more, and we would love to have you come join us. But that is it for this video. I hope you have a fantastic day, happy reading, and I'll see you next time.